Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
Howie, how are you today?
Hello. Good. I'm very good, Kurt.
It's good to see you. So, Howie, tell me about the work you do. How'd you get into branding? And then who do you do branding for these days? Who do you focus on?
Yeah, no, sounds good. I'm really an infant solopreneur. So I've worked with, I worked in a big agency for almost a decade. And at the spring of last year, I kind of went out on my own. So I'm the founder and principal of Healthy Brand Consulting. I work primarily with healthcare companies, and whenever they have an inflection point in their journey of a company, that's where I come in. I really help translate business to brand strategy and really focus on the healthcare space.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about that business to brand strategy piece of it, because most companies don't, when they think of branding, they think of logos. All right. So let's start at the basics, right? Tell me from your perspective, what's your philosophy and what's your definition of branding?
Yeah. So, that's the bane of every brand builder's existence, which is brand as a logo. And, with the recent change of Twitter to X, right? Everybody's talking about, oh my God, the brand sucks and this and that. I mean, we can go down an entire rabbit hole about that. But for me, really, I go back to Marty Neumeier, right? So he's a brand guru. I really liked his sort of definition, which is really the brand is owned by the customer, if anything else. It's a feeling when you're not in the room, when your product or service is not in the room. And for me, that feeling is important because for me, brand is really that shortcut to decision making. Like we make thousands and thousands of decisions as humans every single day. Yeah. But as we all know, we make these decisions, most of them very quickly. I mean, we don't even think about it, right? So back to the Nobel Prize winning psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, right? He talked about system 1 and system 2 thinking. We're primarily in system 1 thinking, which is making things in snap judgments.
Yes.
For me, brand makes that decision making so much easier. It exists in system 1.
I love that because I think that's the reason why, and especially business owners or decision makers in some of these businesses don't, because it is such like air, right? It's nothing you can grab onto and hold on to. So sometimes they don't respect it maybe as much as they should. And I think, again, people try to think of, and branding has changed so much, right? Because now it's, can I get the domain? Right. That's where I start with my branding. Right. Is that a mistake, Howie?
Well, so for me, really branding starts whenever a product or service, a company is going to interact with a person.
Okay.
So you can do everything basically in a test tube. So you figure out your business strategy, you figure out how you're going to make money, your business model and all that stuff. But once you decide, all right, we got to open this test tube up and work with people. You need brand strategy, which is then how are we going to interact with them? What is the purpose? How are we going to communicate this vision? How are we going to tell our story? What are the principles that we build our business, conduct our business upon, right? Foundations of your value proposition, your offering, how does it go to market? Like all this for me is part of a brand strategy. You can absolutely make winning decisions, right? For strategy, but you never start with the shiny objects because the shiny objects needs to be based on the foundation of strategy.
Right. Yeah. You've got to have that foundational piece first. So speaking of that foundational piece first, if I'm thinking about, let's say I am a business owner, I'm listening to this, Howie, and maybe my brand isn't as strong as it could be. Maybe people know it, my customers know it, but it doesn't really convey anything other than the title of the company. What's some of the first steps I should be thinking about when I'm thinking about either a refresh or, I don't know, some other word that describes enhancing it, I guess.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to understand how you're being positioned in the marketplace. So this is number one. And really, that's a combination of how are you different? How are you relevant to those that you want to serve? And how sustainable are you? I mean, in terms of competition, right? How easily will competitors going to take your place? So if you have a firm understanding of those three things, I think you're in a good spot. But if you're a little bit like, we're this, but maybe it's that, maybe we're different, but not really, you need to start the process of fine tuning that. I mean, that's like number one. That's the basics.
Okay. Yeah, because I recently had someone on the show and we talked about some different brands. And one brand that he had worked with that he brought up was Patagonia, for example, is that it is, if you go to Patagonia's headquarters, it feels like Patagonia. It's got a crazy hippie surfer guy as the receptionist and people are walking around in sandals and all these things. So I think from what I understand, it's a big part of who you are as a culture too, right? Not just how you go to market, but it's how are you living your values and your messaging, right?
Yeah, you're hitting a sore point here too.
Okay.
One of the biggest issues that I see out there, Kurt, is that branding is kept in the marketing realm. I mean, sorry to say, marketers, I was a marketer. I am still a marketer, but this is where branding was born. But really, branding has shackled it. I mean, marketing has shackled branding into that department. And so the full aspects of it, you don't really see unless you have founders that understand this concept, right? Like Patagonia, like Phil Knight from Nike, like they understand that a brand is what makes the company, the character of the company. It's not your marketing department. It's not sales. It's not customer service. It's not HR. It's not PR. It's all of it. It's the entire alignment inside and out that makes a brand, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the ecosystem, everything that all the pieces, all the boulders and all the sand in between it, right? That's holding them together.
That's right.
And so back to what I was saying. All right, so let's say I do some of that exploring. I have an understanding of how I'm going to market. What are some of the questions I should be asking myself or of my team when it comes to thinking about how do I rebrand or refresh or enhance what I currently have? What are some questions I should be asking of ourselves?
Yeah. I think if you're not going to get someone to help you out, someone like me, for example, you still need to ask these questions, which is two main questions right at the beginning. What is something that I uniquely believe in? Or what is something your organization uniquely believes in? Right? And why do you exist?
Yeah.
So you talk about Patagonia. You know exactly what his unique beliefs, right? You get an exact sense of the belief system of the company, and you have an understanding that all their actions come back to the reason of their existence.
Yeah.
So answer those two questions. That's foundational to what you're doing. And it doesn't matter. You can be selling water. You can be selling a widget. It can be anything. But what is a unique belief and why do you exist?
Well, and that's the disparity that I think us as consumers, but also as professionals that work in this space see all the time, where you've got these examples of Red Bull, Liquid Death, kind of sort of brands, right? But then you've got like the car dealership down the road, which is, and you go there. Why do you exist? Well, to sell cars. That's why we exist. What do you mean? You're asking me what dent in the universe I want to make? Well, I want to sell more cars. So it's challenging, especially because a lot of times these businesses are not started by branding people and inherent people who are good at branding. Maybe they're good at personal branding, right? You see a lot of ex-football players start a car dealership, for example. They have some good branding and they carry it with them, and that's kind of the message. So you work in healthcare a lot. I'm guessing a lot of these people that you're working with are healthcare professionals that have started this company.
Yeah.
I would hazard a guess, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but that branding is not top of mind when it comes to the organization.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the most important things, obviously, in the healthcare space is, especially in the medical device space, you got to make something that works and it's safe, right? It has to be efficacious and safe. I mean, primarily, the earliest part of the journeys is to build that. But what I'm going to say is, and I quote one of my guests from my podcast, Healthy Brand Podcast, Lisa Bowers. She's a biotech sort of executive. She said, unless you have 5 guys in the garage and you have everything you need, and then there are some biotechs out there that's like that, you need to have a brand, because how are you going to influence a physician to say, okay, I'm going to have my patients do a trial? How are you going to influence a patient to take that drug as a trial? How are you going to influence investors to give you money to go to the next stage of a business? Again, as long as you are interfacing with people and you need to influence them, you need to build a brand. You need to have the foundations of it. And back to your example with the football player in opening a car dealership, I would say this: your belief in why you exist could be, oh, I'm here to sell cars, but don't you want to win? And don't you want to win long term? If you're competing against 10 other dealerships and they want to sell cars too, so what makes you different? Why would somebody pick yours? So why not dig into your personal life? What a big dig into as a professional football player. What is it? Is it ethic? Is it discipline? Why don't you bring that into your dealership? Why do you exist and make a dealership to be a place where it's all about discipline, it's ethics, it's work ethic, it's that, and that becomes your brand. So it's really trying to open people's minds up to what is branding, Kurt. I think that's what's important.
That's great. I love it. I love that perspective, Howie, because like I said, I personally work with a lot of business owners who they've kind of tripped and fell into branding, right? It wasn't a concern, but all of a sudden, when the era of TikTok and search engines and social media and LinkedIn and all these things, all of a sudden, content is becoming a big part of marketing, and generating that content is a big part of it, because marketing is shifted from, well, if I tell you 7 times, 7 different ways, you're gonna remember my product and you'll buy it next time you on the shelf, versus nowadays where it's back to your point about a trusted brand that is not only providing great products, but they're educating me, they're providing service and support around the things that affect me as a consumer of that product, right? So if I'm talking to these folks, the transition has been huge in the last few years. And where do you see things going in terms of branding? I mean, just like you mentioned, we've got Elon Musk coming in with like a big reaper and just tearing through stuff. We've got AI showing up. It's going to design all the stuff for us, right, from now on, and write all of our things and take all of our jobs and then kill us eventually. So besides all of that, Howie, what are some of the trends and things you're seeing in terms of branding that are either happening now or coming soon?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest, obviously, in AI, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's a boon to the industry rather than a bust. I think it helps shed light into the creative aspects of brand building, and which means the irrational part of brand building. So a lot of people miss this. A lot of people don't want to admit this, but hey, humans are irrational. Even if you are a CEO, even if you are a CFO, there is irrationality because we are innately human. So I think the trends will continue to be, we're going to leverage AI, we're going to do all these things, but the companies that win will continue to bring creative, will continue to bring irrationality into how they build their brands. I think that's very important. And it will continue to be true as long as we're dealing with humans, as long as we're not selling to robots in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna save that clip right there, and 5 years from now, I'll play it when we get you back on the show, and you'll be like, okay, so now that we have to brand to robots, well, that's an important point, because again, the world keeps on spinning. So if we're sitting here today and we're thinking about what's that impactful future, it seems like in general, it's not just about understanding that it's a good product, but it's having trust in the organization, trust in that the organization is a solid organization, right? It is because again, like how many times over the years as a consumer you've bought a product and then maybe the company's gone out of business or the warranty expired and you can't get anybody for customer service and all of those things. Because if you go and look at places like Consumer Reports, for example, I mean, some of the things that they rate are things like the response time for customer service if you have an issue or things like that. It's way past just build quality these days, which I think is making the competition even more challenging, which in my mind, to exactly what you're saying, makes branding even that much more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of examples of this kind of stuff. And I think it's not only just the consumer market, which you absolutely saw with Southwest, right? So Southwest Airlines, had the big debacle of canceling all these thousands of flights. Their technology was not up to speed. There were issues underneath the surface, while their branding and communications was on point. It was all about love, all about hearts. You had singing air stewardesses, you had rapping, people. It's great. But again, branding is not just communications. Branding is not just a campaign. It's the systems, it's the infrastructure, it's operations, it's logistics. How do you deliver that promise? Delivering a promise, right, is brand. And essentially, that's what forms that perception and feeling and the decision-making shortcut. And then back in the good old days of IBM in the B2B world, nobody got fired for hiring IBM.
Right. That's the line.
Right. Even if they gave you a stack of, files at the end of it, 10 binders, which went straight into the trash, you weren't fired for it because you hired IBM because they had that brand. Just like McKinsey today, just like any big branded consulting firms, even if it went nowhere, it was okay because their brand is so strong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, you see stock prices rise when people say, oh, we bring in McKinsey for audit or things like that. You'll see the stock prices go up because of that, just because of that brand. Whereas in other companies, you might look at it as a red flag, bringing in an outside consultancy to be like, oh, leadership doesn't know what they're doing. But to your point, it's almost a signal that they do know what they're doing because they're bringing in the right brands and they're partnering with the right people, right? Because a brand does not necessarily just stand on its own, right? It is a part of an ecosystem of the things that affect it as well, right? So if you've got a strong brand, but maybe you've got a partner that drops the ball, and they can be tethered to you and drop you down, right? So you see, whereas in these larger organizations, that's why you have these big procurement type fortresses that are there to protect the company from working with somebody who's a Russian spy or whatever the case may be, some crazy example, And so people have put these checks and balances to make sure that they're working with the right folks. But man, it's a lot of work, Howie.
It's a lot of work. It's not easy. And I think there is this dichotomy because for you to have a consistent and reputable brand, you need to be doing things again and again and again, right? With system, with process. And when you do that, like you said, you put, procurement fortresses and this and that, and everything structured. Guess what? You're again missing out on the irrationality of what brand could be, right? Right. The human part of it, the creative part of it. So you have to, as an organization, not just be on one side of the fence, meaning putting the processes, systems and all that, but you also need to have a part of your company constantly thinking, doing things that are just creative. They're just irrational.
Pushing boundaries, right?
Yeah. Pushing boundaries, just doing things that's uncomfortable. And when those things hit, you can ride that wave, but it has to be greenhoused. It has to be put away somewhere that they kind of do their own thing so that it doesn't hurt the main brand. I mean, think about what Bud Light, think about all these companies they're doing, suddenly trying to do something different, but it hurts their main customer base. I mean, that's not good. That's not what you're in business for.
Right. Yep. Well, and to that point, you see people are trying to push boundaries, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think, again, back to what kind of culture do you have? Do you have a culture of complacency? Do you have a culture of innovation? Which is it? And then how does the brand reflect that? And then how do you live your own brand inside the walls of your organization or the virtual walls of your organization, right? because I think, the mission, vision, values have to all be in alignment around that. But again, back to my earlier point, Howie, I see so many businesses that are like, yeah, our mission is to make stuff, and our vision is that people buy it. And then our goals are we do more this year than we did last year. And why are you talking to me about anything else?
Yeah.
But I see it again. I see it in some people doing it absolutely correctly, right? We have a local barber shop here that is just a small barber shop, and it's just a bunch of guys, but they spend so much time on the look and feel inside of the place and the experience you have, and you can get an appointment online and all these things, right? Where it just all works. And whereas you go to a place like a Great Clips or things like that are more chain type, I mean, it feels the experience. I feel like I'm being shaved by a sheep herder or something. Like it's not the same by any means with that experience. And now again, people have turned these awesome experiences into bigger chains, right? You see like Cane's Chicken is a great example, right? They started out like, we're just going to do chicken fingers. And people are like, that's dumb. And they're like, no, our customers just want chicken fingers and fries or whatever. And they were like, well, yeah, but we're going to have burgers, right? And they're like, nope. And they're like, well, and again, I think they followed and they saw what Five Guys and these other places were doing. And we're like,
yeah,
if I just focus on this one group, I'm going to be successful. And then you wonder why these other chains that offer so much more struggle, right? PF Chang's, for example, go on, look at one of their menus. Oh my gosh. It's like 16 pages of food items. It's, it's everything under the sun. Well, why not just make it a buffet at that point? I don't understand. So again, I guess it goes back. I guess the point I'm trying to make, Howie, is that I do think it takes a visionary leader to see the impact of brand. And if your brand is not doing well, it might not be just your marketing team isn't great, right? It might be more who's in the C-suite that's directing the things that we stand for. And to your point, what I really loved you said was, don't you want to win? If you don't have people in that C-suite that want to win, then they're not going to push things. Complacency will creep in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always talk about this, which is I cannot help you see that your brand matters, but I can help make your brand matter. I can't be the one that's making you feel like you want to win. No, you have to want to win. Right. I can't do that for you. And so, but I also don't need every leader to know everything about brand. They don't. And that's why they have me and people like me to help them with this. I think when you have leaders that want to win and are open to exploring whatever it takes to win, a brand strategist can help you do that. Again, as long as you have an instinctive ability to figure out or understand what your vision is and what your story is and why you're here, we can help you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. I think, again, if people are focused on the right things, which is, like you said, they're not just focused on growth for the sake of growth. They're not just focused on sales for the sake of sales or all those things. They're trying to make an impact. And I see this in different types of businesses, especially in healthcare, because the healthcare is the majority of the work that's done in healthcare is trying to help people, right? Versus a Bridgestone, right? Which is like, we make tires. We don't want them to be grippy, very grippy. That's what our goals are. Grippy tires. Whereas healthcare it's usually not started by somebody who's like, boy, I found a cheap way to make pacemakers.
Right. I think it's interesting because the challenge in healthcare is the opposite, where
tell me more about that.
The purpose might be there, but then it's not unique. It's not unique. If I get a dollar for every company that tells me our purpose is to improve patients' lives, or our purpose is patient outcomes, like I won't have to do my job. That's the other side of the problem, where your belief and your reason for existence is just not unique. It doesn't help you dig into the emotional aspects of why you're here. And I'm not saying that, I'm not saying
because we make decisions emotionally, right? I mean,
yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we do. And so you, instead of being so high up, you can bring it down to something that's super tangible, that aligns with the culture, the technology, the device, like all of that, into something that's different for you. Because this idea of, changing lives or helping patients is too high, is too big. And in the end, you're not a doctor. You're not treating the patients. In the end, you're providing a service, you're providing a tool, you're providing a technology. So what happens there is you have non-healthcare branding folks that go in and be like, oh my God, you're transforming patients' lives. That's it. That's the thing. And then I will be there receiving the second call because it didn't work. I'm like, that's not really differentiating at all.
Yep. Right. Well, that's the thing that's the one last question I want to ask you about, Howie, because we are taught as business leaders, though, we should have a moonshot. We should have a big, hairy, audacious goal. They call them, right? BHAG goals and things, right? I remember years and years ago, the CEO of Humana, big insurance company, said, I want our people to be 30% healthier by 2030 or something like that. And whatever that means. But how do I balance? We need a moonshot. We need something for people to shoot for that maybe is just outside of our grasp, but we also need to get the day-to-day work done. When I say that to you, what's your first thoughts?
Yeah, I think these things are great, right? Because I think for me, again, brand is about alignment. If you can align the people to march forward a very clear sort of vision for the future. I mean, we all know this, when Microsoft first started out, right? It was to have a personal computer in every household. I mean, that's like shit. That's very concrete. Kind of what you needed to do, and it aligned the organization to, that's what we're trying to do as a goal. So, that can be the moonshot, but then it can and should translate to day-to-day what is expected of me. What are the behaviors from a cultural standpoint? What are the goals? What are the objectives? Like, it should cascade.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be disconnected. It shouldn't be like, wait a minute, we're doing this, and then day to day we're doing that. I mean, you just can't. You can't.
Those things don't match together. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. You can't be Medtronic and be like, I want a pacemaker in every man, woman, and child. Like, what? Wait, whoa. That's a goal.
That's funny. That's a really point. That's awesome.
Well, but it's true that these companies, they want to grow for shareholder value. They want to grow because it keeps their people happy, because their people can grow with the organization, keeps employees around longer. Customers build value over time, right? Apple has found that over and over again, is that once you're in the Apple ecosystem, you just keep buying and buying and buying. So it's important that people understand it, but it is just so many people that I think are like, well, that's Apple. That's not me, right? Or that's how Patagonia does things. I buy their stuff. I love their stuff, but not my oil change place is not like that, right? But listening to you, Howie, there should be no difference in how you're approaching branding, whether you're Apple or, I mean, scale, or versus the local car mechanics place, right? It's the same mindset.
Absolutely. The scale is different, but the philosophy and mindset should exist, whether you're large or small. I mean, look, like every one of these huge companies started out small, right? Mm-hmm. Phil Knight sold his shoes out of his car. I mean,
right, out of the trunk of the car.
Right, that's right. But the philosophy was the same. Like, it was to help athletes. It was about athletes, right? Where everybody was an athlete. It was exactly the words from his coach, Bill Bowerman, his co-founder. This is what he said. Yep. And that has been true for the entire history of Nike, whether it was a two-man band or now a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that philosophy, again, can't just be in your outwardly, it doesn't stick if it's just your front of the house. It's got to be in the back of the house too. It's got to be running the same way that you're talking about yourself on the outside. Because I do see these disconnected organizations sometimes where on the outside, it looks all shiny and great, but internally it's kind of chaos. And, you know, it's almost by sheer willpower that they keep going. It isn't by any sort of plan or moonshot or direction or anything, right? So
yeah.
Well, and that's a good segue, Howie, because I want to talk about when do I bring in somebody from the outside? Where should I be when I think of it's time to bring in somebody like Howie? Maybe I've done as much as I could with my internal team. What sort of questions or problems do people show up to you with, and when it's a good time to bring in somebody from the outside to help?
Yeah, I would say the reality of when I get these things is quite different from when you should be thinking about something.
You and me both. You and me both. Yeah, it's like you should have called me 3 or 6 months ago, but here we are. Here we are.
Right. I would say when you should be thinking of something like that is when you start to get symptoms of misalignment. Symptoms of misalignment, which means what you're saying is not congruent with what you're doing. The outside start to have a mismatch with the inside. I think whenever leaders feel like there is something that's misaligned and really trust your gut on this, I think a lot of people understand this. You should start to think about bringing in a brand strategist, right? As long as your business strategy is not in flux still, if your business strategy is pretty sound, you know what you need to do, but everything else feel like it's misaligned, it's not congruent, it's time to bring in a brand strategist to help you. Now, those that approach me, it's, hey, Howie, I need a logo. Hey, Howie, I need a brochure. Hey, Howie, what about social media posts? And then, of course, the more questions I ask, it goes down to the foundation of what we just talked about. What do you want to be known for? Why do you exist? Right? Who are you really? What's the character of the brand? So I would say when leaders start feeling some degree of misalignment and the brands and the business strategy is kind of concrete and set, you should find a brand strategist to help you articulate and bring it to life.
Yeah, because I think bringing in those outside voices is so important to enhance an organization. While while obviously you should be tooled up to be able to help yourself, having people that, and what I like to refer to it as a disinterested third party, and I don't mean disinterested in the work, I mean disinterested in the politics that are going on inside the organization that might be impacting this work, and the territorial nature that people can get in sales and marketing and delivery and production and those sorts of things. So bringing in outside people, they don't have any ties to that sort of thing, and they can usually cut right through the crap and start to help you get through to some amazing things. Well, speaking of amazing things, Howie, I could talk to you all day. If I want to get in touch with you, where's a great place to do it? Where do you hang out? Where should I find more about Howie?
Yeah, the best place is to find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I post content daily, 7 a.m. Central. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. And website, if you go to howiechan.com or healthybrandconsulting.com, I'm there as well.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.